So the question, is it challenging to maintain a high vibe in 2023 and beyond? I really can't tell the future, so I don't know how much things could change or if they will change or not change at all. I don't know. But I'm here to look at a few things because I'm at a point in my life where I'm seeing that I can actually drastically transform how I experience life on a day-to-day basis, simply because I choose to. Simply because I can choose my vibe, I can choose my personality. In every single moment of life, I can choose how to respond. Or if I even want to respond, if I don't want to respond. It's such a cool thing. Like, it really is. However, there are also other things, right? There is the internal reality, the individual experience, right? There's also the external reality. And of course, the external reality is a mirror of the internal experience and the internal reality, of course. But there are also other things going on, right? This is kind of like it's not just the main character vibe, right? It's also, I don't remember what it's called, but it's also that thing where it's like, okay, well, this is life, here I am, and everyone else is just a pawn in my life. No. Everyone else has their own individual life. Therefore, everyone else makes their own choices, right? Those choices can actually affect me or somebody else or multiple other people, right? Especially if it's something that creates tragedy and chaos, right? There are different events happening in the world that are contributing to mass suffering, right? And that mass suffering actually has an effect on people, of course, right? Because humans have the capacity to experience empathy and compassion. And when somebody else or multiple people are going through something, right, it can affect people, right? There are things that are not directly happening in my own life that are affecting me because I have empathy. And when I discover that something that I would argue to be, unlawful, unjustified, sad, unfortunate, when anything like that happens, it affects me, which also affects my vibe, right? Now, the thing is that my vibe, just like everyone else's vibe, is important, right? The higher vibe an individual is, the more positive of an influence an individual can have, not only on themselves and on their own life, but on other people's lives as well, right? So that then begs the question, and there's also more to explore as well, but that then begs the question, is it challenging to maintain a high vibe in 2023 and beyond? There are more things than just, events that are happening around the world that are leading to unfortunate human suffering, loss of life, everything, There are families that are creating dynamics of enmeshment because they are unhealed. There are individuals who are just discovering that they were raised in systems of enmeshment, and now they need to do what they need to do for themselves to take care of themselves and heal and, individuate, differentiate, all that kind of stuff. There's a big theme of responsibility here. I think that responsibility has been a theme for quite a few years now. When I look at responsibility, I see that I am responsible for myself, and I'm also responsible for how I treat other people, of course, right? However, at a point, there comes a boundary with responsibility, right? If I am a fully grown, autonomous individual who is capable of taking care of himself, right? And there are many other people out there, too, that are capable of doing that as well. To what extent am I actually responsible for another person? This is where boundaries come into play. And the reason why I talk about boundaries here is because one of the reasons that a high vibe can actually be achieved comes from boundaries, right? Some people don't have boundaries at all, because that's a different story. Some people have permeable boundaries, some people have rigid boundaries, and other people have healthy boundaries. This is something that I explored in another video about a week ago, I think. This pertains to what I'm talking about. In fact, boundaries in and of itself are probably, I should say, in and of themselves, are probably one of the most important aspects of this whole matter of being able to maintain a high vibe. Growing up, I learned a belief that life is just this fucking roller coaster of ups and downs, and you better enjoy the highs while they fucking last, because they're gonna be gone. I don't buy that anymore. I don't. I think that the reason why I was so kind of like hooked onto that earlier on in life is because I believed that I had to get on everyone else's roller coasters and ride the fucking highs and lows with them. The highs were good, right? The lows sucked. They really did. That was until I learned, I mean, yes, highs were good, lows sucked and everything, but it was only that way until I learned about boundaries, and that what other people are going through is their shit. And that's where the boundary comes into play, right? I used to get hellbent over times and moments and events when other people that I relied on to be okay because of enmeshment and boundary, not boundarylessness, but permeable boundaries, right? I allowed myself to get hellbent because I learned a belief that I was responsible for how they felt, right? So if they weren't okay, then I couldn't be okay, right? And I could only be okay if they were okay, and in order for them to be okay, like, I had to do something for them to be okay, right? Now, here's the interesting thing, because this has to do with boundaries and responsibility, right? Which is something that I would argue to be one of the most important themes of this entire video. Because is it challenging to maintain a high vibe in 2023 and beyond? I can imagine that for the next 5 years, we'll probably see a lot of the same themes around the world of different things happening, of chaos, tragedy, suffering, unfortunate loss, as well as awakening and insight and individuality, individual discovery, all that kind of stuff. But one of the biggest themes of this is boundaries and responsibility. Why is it that I found it so challenging for myself to maintain a high vibe throughout my life? One, I didn't even really know what the fuck that was. I thought that it was my responsibility from a very early age to jump on everyone else's fucking roller coasters and endure the fucking painful lows and then wait for the highs to come around. Until I realized that, no, that's just other people's experiences, and I get to be over here just doing my jam and having my fun. So, I would argue that it will be challenging for a person to maintain a high vibe if they don't utilize healthy boundaries and see responsibility for what it is. Because responsibility is a very specific thing, right? Again, a single person is only responsible for themselves, right? To take care of themselves, and also how they treat other people. Just two things. Have boundaries with the self and with others, and be kind and respectful to other people. That's it. Like, it's actually that simple. However, and I've had experience with this, when a person has permeable boundaries and there's like looseness, right? And there's enmeshment and all that stuff, and your responsibility is to now take on this other person's responsibility. Like, you know, it's like, it can be that way if the dynamic is of permeable boundaries or a lack of boundaries altogether. Anyway, so I don't personally think that it's challenging to maintain a high vibe. And not only, let me just say real quick, I don't buy anymore the narrative that life is just ups and downs. I don't. It's a belief. Like, that's what it is. I don't. And the coolest thing too is that whenever I found myself in moments where, like, I'm not really feeling well, like, I actually sit with myself and ask myself why I'm not feeling well, and if it's actually necessary to not feel well. And a majority of the times, what I've found is that I'm actually just getting sucked into somebody else's frame, and their energy, and their boundaries, and their shit, which has nothing to do with me. And as long as I'm being a decent person, respectful, kind, all that stuff, I treat them well, the responsibility, anything more of a responsibility is a matter of outside of the boundaries that have been set, right? So I think that it would only be challenging to maintain a high vibe for any person on the face of this planet if they don't set healthy boundaries and they recognize what it is that they're actually responsible for, right? And I'm going to say this because I think that it needs to be said. I don't know what the future is, but I know human behavior and I understand human nature and how, oh, that kind of rhymed, human behavior, human nature. Chaos is there. You don't need to turn on the TV to know that chaos is there. You don't need to turn the TV on to know that there are adult children on news stations arguing with each other, right, and getting triggered and blowing up on each other. You don't need to turn on the TV to know that there is just, tragic things happening around the world. You don't need to. Now, the question is, how tuned into that stuff do you need to be? That is of the individual's choice. That really is. I know that a lot of people might be like, well, no, you need to be a good citizen. You need to know what's going on all the time. You need to be tuned in. People need to take care of themselves. And a lot of this stuff is extremely stressful. It really is. The best thing that any person can do on the face of this planet is to take care of themselves first. Seriously. And the reason being is because they really can't take care of anybody else until they take care of themselves. And if they're stressed, they're not going to be able to approach other people on a decent basis. That's just the reality of it, right? So it might be challenging to maintain a high vibe in 2023 and beyond if people don't utilize healthy boundaries and understand what is and what isn't their responsibility, right? Many people, I've been here before, many people have permeable boundaries. In many ways, I still am. Many people have